You already know what it is, Fourth Quarter Boyz Sports. It is me, the illustrious one, Professor Lake, in the building, man. Like, comment, share, subscribe, be a Fourth Quarter Boy for life. Hit the notification icon, plus something new. If you really want to support the channel, go ahead and hit the Patreon link in the description box. Also, hit the Twitter link in the description box. Let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to talk about Ryan Poles' tenure thus far. You know, in evaluating a general manager of an NFL football team, you know, there are many different categories I considered as far as breaking down his performance. And there were different ways I could have went with this, but I broke them down to 5 main categories that I think, you know, fans could really evaluate from our perspective. So one of the most important pieces of this evaluation is his management of the cap space. And I gave that an A+. The second most important part of this evaluation goes to the drafting. And I gave him a B. The third part of this evaluation goes to free agency moves, and I graded him as a B-. Player evaluations, I gave him an A. And the CEO face, you know, this means kind of like, you know, how he appears in the media. How do I think other general managers view Ryan Poles? How does Ryan Poles interact with the media to express information to the fan base? So these are some of the things that we're going to be using to sort of get a good evaluation of what Ryan Poles has done thus far. I want to say, to start this out at the beginning, I really wasn't warmed up to Ryan. I really was kind of calloused to some of the moves that he made, wasn't feeling it at all. You know, starting with the free agency moves where, you know, some of our favorite players were let go, or not really let go, but just weren't re-signed. Doesn't really seem like Ryan Poles made any effort to investigate if there's any way to keep some of the good players on the team, but that was a part of the master plan to clear cap space and to start rebuilding from the bottom up. At the same time, as a fan, seeing Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, David Montgomery, you know, go to other teams, it's definitely something that leaves you with a bitter taste in your mouth, because these are guys that appear to me, in my opinion, to fit the Eberflus hits principle, but this is a business. And, you know, I had to say that just so you know where my starting point was to where I'm coming around to now. So let's start with the cap space management. I told you guys I gave Ryan Poles an A+ for his cap space management, you know, just keeping, you know, the roster healthy, being able to make moves when necessary, having enough money to being able to say no to certain players if they want to break the bank during free agency. You know, at first I didn't appreciate Akeem Hicks being a Buccaneer, or Khalil Mack being a Charger, or Bilal Nichols being a Raider, or even now David Montgomery going to the Lions. But, you know, understanding that, you know, business is business, and some guy is going to overpay for these guys, and Ryan Poles just isn't going to do that. Then looking at some of the signings that he made in free agency, you know, he's not going to overpay for a superstar, but what he will do is pay somebody a decent wage, you know, who might be like a second tier free agent in hopes that they overachieve, but it's not going to hurt the cap. An example of this is like some of the moves that he made last year. And, you know, coming into the next season, in the 2023 season, a lot of the guys that we brought in, you know, we don't have them on the books, and, you know, it added to the cap space for this season going in. And, you know, it allowed us to make the moves that we needed to make, you know, to kind of like solidify our offensive line, you know, to bring in a revamped linebacking core, to bring in some pieces on the edge and the interior defensive line. So, you know, he really made some moves in free agency. Now, you know, we'll get into his draft philosophy, but, you know, just as far as his cap space and not leaning into some of the other different categories, even though they're all, you know, related and attached, you know, I got to give his cap space management an A+. Now, as far as drafting goes, character is number one, and he made this very clear last year when it came out that George Pickens had some character issues, some incidents that happened on the sideline, and different things like that. And I was one of the Bear fans that wanted him to draft George Pickens, give Justin Fields a weapon. But, you know, Ryan Poles is, he's very sturdy on this fact that he's not going to draft a guy that's going to be a problem in the locker room. He's not. He doesn't care how talented or how much the guy could help the Bears. You know, it's not worth the headache with the in-between times, you know, covering up different things that this player might have done here and there. And I understand that. You know, I definitely have to give him credit for making those decisions, even though last year, around draft time, I was in big disagreement with him passing over George Pickens or the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. Truly, it's still up for debate. To be honest with you, depending how the career of George Pickens goes and, just different things like that, that's still up for debate. But I can understand the reasoning and the mindset and, picking two guys that are going to be good pros for a very long time and help out the team. Now, looking at some of the players that he's drafted, one of the things that I've noticed is that, some of the guys don't have the best tape in the world, as far as showing dominance and, just a sheer separation between them and the other guys. Outside of Darnell Wright, a lot of these guys were competing, and it seems like that when you look at the tape. So what I do see is that he heavily relies on, body types, length, speed, strength. So when someone doesn't necessarily stand out on the tape, or if there's a draft where there's a minutia of mediocre talent coming out, where no one really separates themselves, he was able to pivot and start drafting based on a player's traits and their skill set. They can be coached into all-pro players. Again, he values length and speed, and sometimes he values that over the tape. Some of the draft picks that Ryan Poles hit on: Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright, Javon Dexter, Zach Pickens, Roshan Johnson, Tyler Scott, Noah Sewell, Tyreek Stevenson, Travis Bell. These are guys that, Ryan Poles has hit on. The only glaring bust that I think Bears fans are just hopping all over, it was just his first season. So, he definitely has the opportunity to improve, is Velus Jones. So, the room for growth and development is out there. But again, going back to the 2022 draft, it's still up for debate. Could Ryan Poles have drafted a receiver in that second round? So getting back to free agency, I'm going to keep this quick. Ryan Poles does not overspend. He's frugal and he doesn't reach for need. He almost did, and I think that was a learning lesson with the Larry Ogunjobi deal. And I think it was a lesson that he learned. And going forward, he's not overpaying. And he's really going to evaluate these guys before he makes an offer. In my opinion, whatever the market is for who's the most talented player in free agency, Ryan Poles is not going to overspend for that guy. Ryan Poles is willing to spend money on second-tier talent in hopes that they overachieve and prove to be better than some of the guys that are grabbing top dollar in free agency. The one downside with Ryan Poles' frugalness and his discernment is that sometimes he might miss key positions in free agency, but that's something I'm willing to do in order to keep the cap space right and not overpay for somebody that might not be as talented or grow into the guy that you really want him to be, as somebody that you could train up from the roots and get him out the draft. And the other part of that is that, a lot of free agents might be turned off by Ryan Poles and his discernment on what he's willing to pay. Now, player evaluations, just really quickly, it goes back to the contracts that you see him giving out. He's not going to overpay. It says a lot about Ryan Poles and his discernment about a player and how he evaluates them. He's not going to overpay. He's not. You could have made it to 3 Pro Bowls. He's not going to overvalue you just because you could get the money somewhere else. He's not going to do it, and he's not going to pay for it. Now, the last category is Ryan Poles' CEO face. What am I talking about? I'm just talking about his public appearance to fans, how he delivers information to fans, his honesty, his transparency to the fan base and to people who are listening to him, and also his business acumen with the players and the organization, and how other general managers view him. So one of the first things that I've noticed is that he's laying down a strong organizational foundation. Do's and don'ts. What kind of players are we looking at, and what kind of players are we not looking at? How are we doing business with agents and players without agents? He's moving forward. He's laying down the foundation on how to be a Bear if you want to be here. I believe publicly, he doesn't like talking about contract negotiations, but I think he is honest about how he feels about certain players. And I think he's honest about his intentions in the media. But at the same time, business trumps all of that. And one of the prime examples of that is, trading Roquan Smith. We're not going to do business like that. We're not going to do business in the public. I value class and character when we do business. And if we can't do business like that, you could do business with somebody else. He's laying the foundation, and I could respect that. He wants players with character, and that's something that the fan base should be cool with. They should be excited about. With all the losing and not making the playoffs and different things like that that's been going on, people in the media talking bad about the McCaskey family and wanting them to sell the team. You know what Ryan Poles does? He brings respect on the McCaskey name. If anything, if the Bears win this season and things go the way the fan base wants it to go, that'll be one of the greatest decisions that the McCaskey family has made by hiring general manager Ryan Poles and bringing him into the fold. And like me, they will have to, swallow those words when they talk bad about the McCaskey family. I never talk bad about the McCaskey family, but you hear it in the radio, you hear it on the podcast, and it is what it is. You have to give the McCaskey family credit. You have to give the hiring organization and team credit as well. Also, so far so good. We've been through a lot of turmoil of one of the worst seasons in Bears history, but he's not afraid to face the media, and I like that about the guy. And he talks common sense to the fan base, and I appreciate that, in a general manager. And lastly, it's just one of these things I think a lot of other general managers are beginning to respect Ryan Poles as a general manager, not trying to get over on deals, understanding the type of general manager they're dealing with if they ever want to make a deal going forward with the Chicago Bears. But as I said before, man, I was a guy that really was kind of tough on Ryan Poles at the beginning, and over time, just seeing how things played out, I become a little bit more optimistic, thus me jumping back down in the game and talking about the Bears a little bit more. Very excited about this upcoming season. With all of that in mind, you already know what it is. Fourth Quarter Boyz Sports. I'm the illustrious one, Professor Lake, in the building, man. Hit me on the Patreon, man, so I can keep this thing going, possibly stop the 9 to 5 and, do this full time. So hit me up on the Patreon. It's Fourth Quarter Boyz Sports. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I'm out.